It's really cool.
Bonjour, hello, and welcome to the Rosbifs Rugby podcast, your one-stop shop for all things French rugby. Pro de deux, top 14, national, and very much this week, the national side, as well as the towns, cities, bars, restaurants, fans, music, everything else in between that makes French rugby so magnificent. It is midweek podcast, so I am doing the intro. I am Rob Graham, but don't fear, I am joined bright, well, not particularly bright, and early this Thursday morning by Richard Croney. Richard, how are you?
No, I'm okay. I'm good. I'm glad to be here at this the witching hour to be discussing. Looking ahead to the Autumn Nations, I have been laid low by a very, very serious case of man flu 19 or whatever we call it these days. But yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
So, I guess the agenda for today is just to look at it's a preview for the international games at the weekend. So it's the first proper round of the Autumn Nation series. I know it kicked off last week, but the international window is fully open this weekend. So we've got a boatload of fixtures all over Europe. But obviously our focus is on France versus Japan, which is going to be held at, I think it's 8:10 UK time on Saturday. It's certainly an evening one at the Stade de France. We are recording this Thursday morning. It's about 2:30 a.m., just so you know. That's how committed we are ahead of our working day. We're up early. Maybe I've embellished that a little bit. But as things stand, we don't have the official side, but we are basically confirmed. And if you're watching on YouTube, you may get a nice visual of the actual confirmed side, because by the time that goes up, we probably will have heard it. So if you are on YouTube, there it is. Look at that wonderful side. It has been widely reported basically all week off the back of last week's training and also the way that the teams have trained this week. Would you like me to run through the team, Rich?
Go through it, yeah.
So, the front row of Jean-Baptiste Gros, Piato Malvaca, Tavita Tatafu. Second row of Thibaut Flamand and Manny Miafu. Back row, Francois Cross, Alexandre Roumat and Greg Aldrit. Tony D at 9. Thomas Ramos at 10. Centres of Yoram Murfana and Emilien Gaeton. Wingers, Louis Bielbiaré and Damien Penaud, with Leo Barret at fullback. And your bench is Julien Marchand, Reda Wadi, Georges-Henri Colombe, Michael Gouillard, Paul Boudon, Maxime Lucu, Gaël Ficou, Mathieu Jalabert. Now, that obviously could be completely different if we've got it wrong, and Midi Olympique, despite being quite right on pretty much everything, have also got their sources wrong. But friend of the pod, Ilton Daffyd, was down at the training camp yesterday, and there was a Blues versus White, and the Blues was very much that starting 15. So I'd say that's pretty conclusive evidence. What are your initial thoughts on that, Richard?
My initial thoughts are it's a pretty strong side. Well, it's a very strong side, isn't it? With not the exception, I still feel we all think that loose head prop is a slightly questionable area. I may be surprised not to see Radar Wardy starting, but look, it's a great side.
Do you think he's going to be all right on the bench next to Julien Marchand after their
scuffle in
their tete-a-tete in the semi-final?
I'm sure they've kissed and made up since then. I think Roumat for Olivon is tough, but I get it. I think Roumat in the last 9 months is probably certainly one of the form back rows. Aldrit isn't getting shifted anytime soon, I don't think, despite a few breathing down his neck. Gaeton, I think that's cool to see. I think everyone would probably agree that Nicolas Deporter would be in there were it not for his injury. But I think we'd maybe assume they would go with the sort of Moefana FIQ axis, and they've plumped for Gaetan, which is great. Obviously, a guy we're both massive fans of. I suppose the big headline selection, right, is the sort of combination and the moving parts surrounding Ramos at 10 over Jalibert, and then what that means for fullback, which is Leo Barre gets a game, which I'm interested to get your thoughts on, because it's I think my views are relatively straightforward and potentially not overly technical, but quite punchy. But yeah, what do you think's behind that?
I think it's the headline selection for both those that are kind of casual French rugby fans, so those that watch just European Cup and the Six Nations, and that's all they get to see of the French games of any France sides. You would think Jalibert kind of is amazing, and Ramos is a brilliant. Is probably the best fullback in the world. He's certainly up there, depending on where the Barrett brothers want to play. But and then also Barre, like if you're a casual rugby fan, you probably haven't seen loads of him. But then I think if you are a hardcore French rugby fan, which I'd like to think we're getting close to, the form of Jalibert this season compared to the form of Barre is quite a significant gap, you'd say, this season. So I think certainly when all of these teams have been coming out and just looking at social media posts and stuff like that, there are a lot of people going mental about the fact that Mathieu Jalibert is not starting. So it is the headline news. I have come up with a couple of thoughts as to why, and I think it focuses. I know before I said it was perhaps creative differences, like the Gallagher brothers or something like that between Ramos and Jalibert. Maybe there isn't the chemistry. There are rumours that Fabien Galthié isn't a huge fan of Mathieu Jalibert. I think I think that's quite harsh to kind of pin the odd kind of mistake on it. I mean, he had the odd mistake in the World Cup, and I think maybe in the past he has as well, but I think that's a little bit harsh, given the teams he's been playing in, because often it's sort of a slightly changed up side as well. I've also come up with a couple of reasons as well. I think the focus is on Barre at fullback as opposed to Jalibert. Like, Ramos is going to play. Ramos is the man, basically, other than Tony D. And if Tony D's not there, Ramos is the man, certainly in that back line. Would you like to hear my possible thoughts?
Go on. I want to hear your conspiracy. Go for it.
First one is the man in possession. He started the last two games of the Six Nations, and he's also started the two tests against Argentina over the summer. So if you think back to the France-England game,
Six Nations.
Yeah, I mean, he technically won man of the match in that France-England game, didn't he? Even though that was quite questionable. And he scored a brilliant try against Wales, or was it England? Maybe both.
I think he scored both.
Yeah, he was really good. And he is the man in possession. So if you look at the changes from their last Six Nations game, they aren't making a change at 10 and 15. Their playmaker obviously changes with Antoine Dupont coming in. The other thing that I've thought of came to me in the middle of the night, so a mere 10 minutes ago, is height, which is, I don't know where this has come from, but it kind of suddenly came to me that, so obviously France lost in the quarterfinals of the World Cup to South Africa, and they struggled under the high ball, whether it was Woki hanging out on the wing. Certainly Louis Bielbarré had a bit of difficulty. Damien Penaud, despite being quite tall, can be flaky under the high ball. He's kind of, because he's so mercurial, he can be good, he can be bad. And Ramos is good under the high ball, but he's short. And I wondered if they're kind of future-proofing themselves for a kicking game against someone, probably a South Africa, probably England, or certainly historically, probably the All Blacks as well. Just a bit more aerial prowess. And I couldn't say with any certainty if Leo Barre is a, Freddie Stewart, Marauder of the Skies type player, or a Geordie Barrett, but he is certainly taller than the rest of them. I think he's like 6'3", maybe even taller.
I'd just have a look. 6'2".
6'2". Whereas Ramos is probably what, 5'10", I imagine.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
That is what I've kind of come up with, because the kicking game, his boot is massive, but Ramos is a brilliant kicker. Jalibert has also got a massive boot if you did want to go down the Ramos Jalibert route. The playmaking, I can't see that much difference. Barre has played a bit of 10, certainly in the under 20s. He's quick. Ramos is quick. Jalibert's quick. So the only thing that I could kind of think of as distinguishing factor was his height. And I wonder if it is just thinking back. I wonder if they're a little bit scarred by that quarterfinal defeat.
Yeah, it's a fair point, because that was fundamentally the Achilles heel, wasn't it? Just over a year ago, whenever it was now. Perhaps I don't think Tomo Ramos is a disaster under the high ball either. So I get the height thing. The other thing I would say to not question that, but to maybe question the overall decision is, I don't think you're not, as you say, you're not looking at Barre. And he's still very young, and I would be lying to say I've seen loads of him play. Certainly not the same amount of the likes of Jalibert and Penaud and Ramos, but he's not seen as that steward, that Hugo Keenan, and he hasn't played loads of international rugby, so maybe that's where that reputation comes from. But as you say, that kind of owner of the skies, the 99% man under the high ball. So it's it's also Ramos is a fabulous player. They're obviously going to try and get him in one way or the other. Jalibert's on the bench. It's not like he's dropped out the squad entirely, so it gives him the option to change it up very quickly, particularly given they're going with the 5-3, I think, which they haven't always done. But yeah, I think my fundamental feeling is, particularly with form, because Barre has not been great individually, and he's been playing in a Stad side that have really struggled. Not that should necessarily.
He went well in that game that they won recently, which was the last game
Clermont.
he played for Stad. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I mean, Clermont were dreadful. So what can you? But he has been abysmal in some of the games.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think there's, for me, at the most basic level, I think a team that has a backline with Jalibert and Ramos in is a much better backline than has, at least at this stage, and I'm willing to be proven wrong, Tomo Ramos and Leo Barre in it, is my, let's say, very simplistic summary of how I view it.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I think I'm a Jalibert over Entrées man anyway. So even Entrées fit, I'm picking Jalibert at 10. So I don't agree with the selection. There is clearly other stuff going on behind the scenes, or there is some other thinking happening within Fabien Galthier's coaching setup, which I don't understand, but it is what it is. And I was just kind of, that's the only things I could come up with were man in possession and a bit of height maybe, and a bit of aerial stuff. But I guess the other thing is that they love Ramos and they think Ramos is the man, and they just want Ramos at 10. Like
one of the
relationship with Dupont, maybe.
Yeah, the only other thing with Ramos, which became evident at points during the last Six Nations, is that his defence at 10 can be a real issue. Like
Jalibert's not great either, to be honest.
No, but I think there were more sort of standout examples during that Six Nations of Ramos going full turnstile. And look, there are ways to cover that. Yeah, there have always been 10s who are a little bit flaky, but I find the whole thing quite interesting, particularly given. So we're probably going to speak a tiny bit about the centres, particularly given they've gone with Mo Afana, and at some point they're going to, you would assume, go Dep or Tep, and then you're getting close to that sort of UBB backline with top and tailed with Dupont and Ramos possibly.
Yeah.
Which in itself is maybe, I don't know, maybe that's something they're trying to get away from. I don't know. But with the selection of Mo Afana at 12, and I think we can put a bit too much emphasis on combinations. But it does surprise me, I'm not going to lie.
So moving on to that then, What do you make of Mofana at 12, Gaeton at 13, Fiku on the bench? I think it might be. No, I mistranslated. I was like, this can't be the first time he's ever been on the bench, but it can't be. He won't have been on the bench that many times.
No, I wouldn't have thought so. I quite like it, to be honest. I think I feel a bit sorry for Gael Vika in the sense that I think he hasn't been in great form recently. And he's been around so long, you'd think he's someone kind of coming into their twilight years, but I think he's 30.
Yeah,
He's got, he's potentially got a lot of rugby left in him. But he has been out of form, and I don't think either of us are overly convinced with, he has played 12 in the past, but not for a while, and not consistently for a while. Mo love Gaiton at 13. Like, if you're not going to play him at 13, this guy is, one of the sort of real hottest prospects coming through. So if you're not going to give him a crack against Japan and with an eye to the All Blacks, you can defer back to Fiku if you want. Like, I don't see that as too much for a problem. Moefana is an interesting one because obviously we thought he was possibly going to be banned for this, didn't we? Which would have thrown things up. I really like Yoram Moefana, but I'm a little bit to be convinced at international level, I will be honest. So I think this is a great opportunity for him to kind of nail that down, particularly whilst Jonathan Dante's a bit out of nick.
I think I've said in the past, like he can do stuff in a game that makes you. He never quite kind of fully grasps control of a full game in like the biggest games. I think he's clearly a very, very competent, capable, talented player. Like, he's got multifacets to his game. I actually think the last season, kind of, I first started noticing him at Ubebe, kind of when Ubebe really hit their stride, him kind of taking on a Fiku type role of just being involved in a hell of a lot, like around the fringes. Like, you think Fiku, you quite often see him popping up like just around a ruck or pick and going from a ruck and kind of being like a little bit of a link man between the forwards and backs. And I have seen a little bit of that from Moefana. So I wonder if that's kind of, I'm quite encouraged by that. And I think he does have it in his game to become what Fiku has been for France. I think he's also still pretty young. Like, I think he's like 23, 24.
Yeah.
On Fiku, he is very young still, but I wonder if it's that kind of Wayne Rooney thing of like, you've just got so many miles. He might be 30, but there's just so many miles in the legs. Like, he was playing for France at like 18, 19.
Something
he
like
made his
that.
debut for Toulouse. It's like 17 or 18. So yeah, there's so many miles in the legs. He hasn't been in great form. I think it's interesting. I wonder if it is a Japan thing. Like, do they need as much defensive leadership? Because they have said for ages that he's their defensive leader. Sean Edwards absolutely loves him. Gael Ficko, as he calls him. But yeah, I wonder if he will come back for the All Blacks, and maybe it's a little bit of a shootout between Moefana and Gaeton for 13 almost, or for who's going to play against the All Blacks. We'll see. I don't. It's definitely not a one-off. I don't think it's a one-off, the dropping of Fiku, but I don't think it's the end.
No, completely agree. And it's great. It's like we've spoken, particularly yourself, at length about Gaeton, and as I say, I think it would have been déporté, wouldn't it, were it not for his face getting absolutely melted. But he's the sort of player that I think generally people have seen as going to be a little bit of he played in Argentina, didn't he? Bit of a duck to water in Test rugby. Sort of great reader of the game, really good basic skills. And I don't know, I wonder if he could could become quite integral to that France backline, because you've got, not saying you haven't got a lot of good game managers, but you've got a lot of, to use the cliche, jouet surrounding him. And I wonder if that little bit of a calm head, despite his tender years, might be quite a valuable asset.
I think both him and Paul Cost, the player that, and obviously this is kind of going wildly overboard at a very early stage. The player that I would liken them to is a kind of Conrad Smith type player, where you've got
Style,
like a kind of quite wiry bloke that's deceptively strong, runs great lines, knows his way to a try line, but a bit of a glue in defence, kind of quite good at scragging people, like just getting hold of people and getting in the way and making a mess of opposition's attacks. It's that kind of player, I'd say. Kind of a bit of a classy Rolls-Royce operator. Moving on to the back row, you mentioned you were pretty happy with Roumat in the back row. Olivon dropped from the 23. Paul Boudon, who has had a big injury layoff but has a pretty good return. I think he was in the top 14 team of the month for October. He is on the bench. Roumat's in to start. Cross isn't moving. Aldrit, people breathing down his neck. Form has been up and down over the last 12 months, I'd say. But he was captain in the Six Nations. They love it. He is a brilliant player on his day. Like, we know how good he is.
Yeah.
He's perhaps dropped off the kind of Surveyor, Doris sort of levels that he was at. But still brilliant. They needed a 7. They've gone with Roumat. I think in that back row, I would have actually gone. I know he's not played a lot, but I would have gone Jelonch, I think, ideally. I would put Boudon lower down the pecking order. I think Olivon has been pretty good this season. A little bit harsh on him to get dropped out of the 23. The reasons I saw from Laurent Sempere were aerial ability. He's a good link man between forwards and backs, and his carrying. And I'd say that when Olivon came into the team was exactly what Olivon was. Like, if you think back to, must have been 2019 or 2020 when he kind of first captained, and he was before his big injury, he was absolutely rapid, like scored a boatloads of tries, carrying was great. I think he has lost an element of that. I'm happy with they could have gone with anyone, I think, in that back row. They've got so many good options. I'm happy with pretty much all of them.
Yeah, it's a bit of an embarrassment of riches, as it often is, to be honest. Top teams in the back row. I don't mind. Like, it is tough on Olivon, but I don't mind it. I think there are more kind of coming men. I get the idea. For me, Roumat, I was really not convinced. He was the big performance that did it for me was that was the Heineken Cup final, or the Champions Cup final, whatever it's called now. He was absolutely magnificent, and I agree with all of those reasons for bringing him in. I wonder if he might have a little bit of a short window to prove himself and establish himself properly with the likes of Jelonch, with Boudon, with Olivon still there. And also, I think there are a few people breathing down the neck who are very much the coming men, with your Gazzottis, your Nucci's, who I know they're still young and I know they've made different skill sets, but I do wonder if at some point, the only thing for me that does lack a little bit in that back row is a bit of like out and out dynamism.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, they will probably not recognise, or there'll be an opportunity for a Gazzotti or someone to at least
Castro
be on the
Ferreira.
bench. Castro Ferreira, great shout. Because I think that's the way it's kind of tended to go. You look at sort of New Zealand with Surveyor, the role someone like Quacker Smith has played for South Africa. There's a real Ben Earl. There's a real place for somebody who's maybe a bit more of a I guess what would have been like that kind of disruptive 7, but is now a bit more number agnostic and is just an absolute handful. And I think they do lack that a little bit. Albeit when you've got like players like Malvaca and Cyril Bay when he's back, like you get a lot of that workload through them.
Yeah. And their second row options are all very dynamic. Well, Mioffi's a lump, but Flamont can play back row. it looks like Boschaton is going to become a second row. Guillard himself has played number 8.
Yeah.
So yeah, they've got it around the park, haven't they?
Yes.
So loose head prop, they've not got a load of options. I've not seen loads of Gross. You mentioned Wardy, for you would be a starter. Talfa Vanur, I think, has been good this season and was good off the bench, certainly against Wales, I think, on his debut. But I've not seen loads of Gross. I think Talfa Vanur is good. He was great for Lyon at times last season. I'd probably go Wardy myself as someone that we've seen in more top level games, certainly for La Rochelle. But I guess talking of debuts, Tavita Tatafu, Tongan born, he's been in France for 5 years, 150 kilos, aged 21, 22. In at the start, Georges-Henri Colombe, who was brilliant in the summer series and was pretty good in the back end of the Six Nations, is on the bench. What do you make of that one?
Well, surely this is the key story here is that it's going to be the first time ever in international rugby you have 2 players on opposing sides with exactly the same name, with Bordeaux's number 8, also named Tavita Tatafu, playing for Japan. Also,
there's rumours Tavita Tatafu, the prop, is going to Bordeaux. That's going to be absolute carnage. And I'd like to point out that we did note at the time that they scored in the same game last year, which was amazing. I'd forgotten that completely. I wonder if Fabien Galthié has just gone, yeah, that's fun, isn't it? Just to confuse Sean Edwards.
From what I've seen, I just think they're both outstanding, and maybe you get a bit more from Tatafu in the loose, and a little bit more in the set piece from Colombe.
That's what I would say.
But they're both pretty destructive in open play and packing down. I'm not too bothered either way, to be honest with you. I personally think they will both usurp Antonio relatively quickly if they can stay fit.
Antonio's 30. I mean, if prop, he could probably go for another 4 years, but I think he's just signed another big contract, hasn't he? With 27 with La Rochelle. So there's life in the old dog yet. Big part of the culture as well at both La Rochelle and
outstanding.
And I wonder if as Colombe moves to Toulouse, that might help. I wonder also if it's just a one-off for this. I wonder if it will switch around for the All Blacks with and it's just a case of getting Tatafu a start, getting him into the setup, getting him a cap, because he is still technically eligible for Tonga, even though he's been in a couple of squads now. Cool. Japan, do you see them pose? You mentioned Tavita Tatafu. Top 14 fans, Naito Saito, the new Toulouse scrum half, who is a wild, kind of rapid sort of bloke. I don't think they're going to pose much of a threat this weekend, are they?
Probably not particularly given they got absolutely thumped by New Zealand a few weeks back,
and England in the summer at home.
Yeah, they are quite fun to watch though, which has been a stereotype, but they have gone a little bit mad under everyone's favourite Eddie Jones. So I suspect there might be like a very, very entertaining kind of first 20-30 minutes, and then it might become a bit one-sided.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if France score under 40 points.
Oh, yeah, I would have thought so. Guy to look out for who's nothing to do with French rugby, but Warner Dearns in the second row, who's been awesome for them.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how he mixes it. He was great against England in the summer. Great to see how he'll go against the likes of Flamand Meafu.
Yeah. And then, so I think we're done on France, Japan after that gripping insight into the Japanese rugby team. But there is, as we mentioned, a boatload of other international games on this weekend with a boatload of French-based players. we've got a whole load of fixtures. We just wanted to touch on them. Spain versus Uruguay. A couple of names to look out for. Joel Merkler, the new Dan Cole, the Spanish Dan Cole, at Toulouse is a prop for Spain, as is John Zabala from Po. Those are the kind of headline names. You've got your man that I'm not going to try and pronounce his surname. He's going
Herman
great.
Oracachea.
Oh, excellent stuff, Richard.
Yeah, who's just signed an extension, I think, at Biarritz.
Nice. That was a brilliant pronunciation off the top.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's been going great at Biarritz this season. You've got Asier Usuraga, who plays kind of back row, second row for Brive, plays quite a lot of games for them. So actually quite a few. Spain take on, and I've just lost it, Uruguay, who have a French-based player captaining them. They've got that guy that's played loads of times. He's got like 80 caps, but he's injured. So Manuel Lindecar, former Bayonne second row, who was one of the 6 yellow card recipients for Oyonnax last week, but big old unit, really good player. He's there. He's captaining Uruguay, and I think that's pretty much it. I thought there might be. Oh yeah, no, Arata isn't playing. Arata isn't in the squad for Uruguay,
Okay.
which is interesting. In fact, they are basically all based in Uruguay for Peñarol. So I thought there would be a few more. I know there's been a history of Uruguayans in French rugby. Portugal take on USA. So the big name there is obviously the return to international rugby of Samuel Marques, the Bezier kind of scrum half. He's quite old now. I think he's like 37, 38. Completely runs the show. He'll be brilliant at that level for sure. As well as Jose Madeira, back rower for Grenoble, plays a bit of second row as well. I know Francisco Isaac is a big fan of his. And Nicholas Martins, who we haven't seen much for Montpellier, former Sax V man. We've not seen much of him at all. Diogo Has Ferreira, big old boy at prop. Francisco Fernandez isn't playing, the old hairy bloke from Bezier. And a couple of the wingers are unavailable as well. Raffaele Costastorti, Pro de top try scorer last year in like 20 games, like not even a full season, is also back playing for Portugal. I don't know how you watch these, but I would really love to watch the Portugal game. That's the one that I would like to see the most. Because a lot of those guys are tearing up Pro Day Dirt and we don't get to see full games. We haven't yet had confirmation of how you watch that in the UK. I wonder if it's on like Rugby Pass or World Rugby or something like that.
Might be.
Italy, Argentina. I reckon Argentina should win that. Should mention there's also Romania, Tonga. There's actually very few Tongan or French-based Tongan players. I think it's just Coleman and Tamefuna are the only ones, which is surprising. But yeah, Italy, Argentina. Obviously, you've got Tommy Allen, you've got Andrew Capelwatso for Italy, but there's a load of Argentinians. I think you look at the form of Malia, and people like that. But I've now gone completely blank.
Could be a good game, that.
That I don't think is on TNT Sport either, which even though it's kind of tier 1 internationals, surprises me.
Frustrating. Lots to look out for. Georgia playing this weekend?
Yes, Georgia are playing in Montpellier. Do you know why they're playing in Montpellier?
Yes. Did we mention this the other day? They're playing an All Blacks 15.
Yeah, who are sponsored. New Zealand or the All Blacks are sponsored, or the NZRU are sponsored by Altrad, obviously the owner of Montpellier. So that is that link there. But plenty of French players, French-based players. Looking forward to seeing Georgie Chavakia tear it up, Grenoble's big man. So yes, plenty of international rugby to look ahead to. We will be back on Monday. We need to wrap this up. We both have an aggressive morning routine, which obviously starts with a 3-hour gym session starting at 3:30 a.m. I just need to go make my 5 protein shakes.
Ice bath.
Yeah, and then I've got 20 minutes of meditation before I go to my big gym session. Obviously ahead of starting work at 7:30 a.m. But We will be back on Monday. We'll just do one podcast next week because we have Pro Day and we have the internationals. There's no top 14. Obviously, we will hopefully have a special guest who will link us to France, New Zealand next weekend. But in the meantime, enjoy your weekend of international rugby. Enjoy watching Les Bleus rip it up at the Stade de France and plenty of other brilliant stuff going on. Richard, where can you follow us?
Instagram, TikTok, um, Threads, X. I think that's it, right? YouTube, although it's
Yeah,
less of a follow, more of a subscribe.
yeah. Like, subscribe, rate, review, get in touch. Let us know your thoughts on the big Barre versus Ramos versus Jalabert debate, as well as anything else. We'd love to hear from you. But until Monday, enjoy your weekend. Au revoir.
Au revoir.